Imagine discovering that every time you rush to explain yourself, you're actually giving away your power. Someone misunderstands your intentions. A rumor begins to spread. A friend believes a version of you that simply isn't true. Your first instinct is immediate. Defend yourself. Explain what really happened. Make sure everyone knows the truth. It feels responsible. It feels necessary. But what if that instinct is the very thing keeping you emotionally chained to other people's opinions? The Stoics understood something that most of us spend years trying to learn. The moment your peace depends on being understood, your peace no longer belongs to you. It belongs to whoever has the power to misunderstand you. Today we're going to explore why letting people be completely wrong about you can become one of the greatest psychological advantages you'll ever develop. Not because truth doesn't matter, but because your inner freedom matters even more. And by the end of this video, you'll understand the difference between protecting your reputation and becoming a prisoner of it. Once you see that difference, you'll never respond to criticism the same way again. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while enduring constant criticism, betrayal, and false accusations. Epictetus spent much of his life reminding his students that our suffering rarely comes from what others say, but from our desperate need to control what they think. Seneca warned that anyone who lives for public approval will never truly belong to themselves. Notice something important. None of them taught passivity. None of them suggested accepting injustice without discernment. Stoicism is not about remaining silent because you're afraid to speak. It is about recognizing the difference between words that serve justice and words that merely serve your ego. Sometimes truth must be spoken to protect others, fulfill a responsibility, or correct a meaningful misunderstanding. But many arguments are different. They are fueled by a desperate hope that someone committed to misunderstanding us will suddenly change their mind. And that almost never happens. The first prison is the invisible addiction to explanation. Most people don't even realize they have it. Every time someone forms the wrong opinion, they feel an overwhelming need to fix it. They replay conversations in their mind. They write long messages that become longer than the original misunderstanding. They imagine the perfect response that will finally make everything clear. But beneath all of that effort hides an uncomfortable question. Why does their opinion carry so much weight? The desire to be understood often disguises itself as honesty, when in reality, it may be a sophisticated form of seeking approval. Social media has only amplified this habit. One misunderstood comment turns into a paragraph. A paragraph becomes a debate. A debate becomes hours of emotional exhaustion over people who were never searching for the truth in the first place. The same thing happens in workplaces, friendships, and even families. The more you explain yourself, the more your emotional state becomes dependent on whether someone accepts your explanation. Without realizing it, you've handed them the keys to your peace. And I want to ask you something. Have you ever tried to explain yourself to someone who had already decided who you were? If you have, write, "I choose my peace" in the comments. You don't have to tell your whole story unless you want to. But that simple sentence can be a reminder, to yourself more than anyone else, that your peace deserves more protection than your reputation. And if you decide to share your experience, you may help someone else realize they aren't alone. Here's what makes this even more fascinating. The harder we fight certain false narratives, the stronger they sometimes become. Psychologists have long observed that when people become emotionally invested in a belief, evidence alone rarely changes their mind. In fact, resistance often reinforces commitment. Think about how many public controversies became bigger simply because someone kept responding to every accusation. Every explanation breathed new life into the story. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Every battle you choose tells your mind what deserves your energy. When you treat every misunderstanding like an emergency, your nervous system eventually begins to believe that your survival depends on managing everyone else's perception. That is an exhausting way to live. So what is the alternative? The Stoic strategy isn't silence for the sake of silence. It is silence born from self-possession. Imagine two people. The first spends every day correcting rumors, defending motives, and chasing approval. The second quietly continues building their life. Months later, who has actually grown? Who has learned a new skill? Who has deepened their character? Who has created something meaningful? While one person fought shadows, the other built substance. This is where the greatest shift happens. People may continue arguing with a version of you that exists only inside their imagination. Let them. While they wrestle with that imaginary person, you remain free to become the real one. That is not weakness. That is strategic freedom. If these reflections are helping you strengthen your peace and emotional maturity, subscribe to Stoic Spring. Every video is designed to help you build the habit of protecting your inner world instead of becoming trapped by external noise. One of the greatest mistakes we make is believing our identity is determined by what others say about us. But character has never been built in public. Character is built in private. It is built in the choices nobody applauds. It is built when no one is watching. It is built in discipline, consistency, honesty, and courage that require no audience at all. In a world where people feel pressured to explain every decision, justify every absence, and broadcast every achievement, privacy has quietly become a form of wealth. Not because you're hiding, because you've stopped performing. You no longer need every stranger to understand your journey. Your life stops becoming a public presentation and starts becoming a private practice. That is what the Stoics meant by freedom. Eventually, something unexpected begins to happen. The people who were only attracted to appearances slowly drift away. The people capable of seeing your actions remain. Your life becomes naturally filtered. Those who insist on believing false stories continue fighting someone who doesn't even exist. Meanwhile, your actual life keeps moving forward. Trying to convince certain people is like polishing a mirror they've already chosen to cover with dust. The problem was never the mirror. No amount of polishing changes someone determined not to see clearly. And perhaps that is one of the greatest acts of maturity. Accepting that understanding cannot be forced, respect cannot be demanded, validation cannot create peace, only character can. So let me ask you one final question. Has there ever been a moment in your life when someone believed something completely false about you and no explanation seemed enough to change their mind? If you've lived through that, share your story in the comments. Someone watching this video may be facing that exact situation today. Your experience could become the encouragement they need to stop wasting years trying to convince people who never intended to understand. Remember this, your freedom does not begin when everyone finally sees who you are. It begins the moment you no longer need them to. Protect your integrity. Speak when truth serves wisdom, justice, or responsibility, but never confuse endless self-defense with strength. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the one who wins the argument. It is the one who quietly walks away with their peace still intact. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to Stoic Spring and continue building the habit of protecting your inner peace, strengthening your emotional maturity, and living with the kind of quiet confidence that no opinion can take away. And if you want to continue learning how the Stoics developed an unshakable mind in a world full of noise and judgment, watch the next video. It may change the way you see yourself and everyone else's opinions forever.